visual indication that we're whispering. Okay?
And it is incumbent upon all of us to speak into the microphone and not lean back and talk.
It is, yes. So it's going to be an excuse for bad posture this evening. All right. I'll try not to. Please join me in the salute to the flag. Okay. Please note that Councillor Schmidt is in excused absence this evening. She is ill. And, all right, we've got sign-ins. How wonderful. Item 2 on the agenda is presentations. We will be hearing from our auditors about the 2009-2010 audit recently completed.
So some room clears out.
All right, no problem.
Okay, we can see that.
Vince, we've got somebody ahead of you that we're,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay. I'll warm the chair for you.
excellent.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. I'm Brad Bingenheimer, one of the partners with the accounting firm of Bolt, Carlisle & Smith. And this last year we had the opportunity once again to serve as the auditors for the city of Silverton. And you should have all received a copy of the audit report for the year ended June 30, 2010. I just want to take a few minutes this evening, highlight a few things in that, and kind of discuss a little bit the audit standards that were applied in conducting the audit of the city. So when we're looking at the audit of the city this last year, we actually applied 4 different sets of auditing standards to this engagement. The first set of auditing standards we had to apply, of course, is generally accepted auditing standards. These are standards that are applied to all audits in the U.S. The second set of standards are standards for Oregon municipal corporations. These are contained in Oregon administrative rules put out by the Oregon Secretary of State and require us to comment on compliance with specific laws and regulations. Then the third set of standards we apply in the audit are those called government auditing standards. These are standards that are issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. And these expand the audit standards to require us to give some additional information on internal controls and on compliance with laws and regulations that could have a direct and material effect on the financial statements. And then the fourth set of standards we applied because of the amount of expenditures of federal awards that the city had for the year ended June 30, 2010. And those standards are found under OMB Circular A133. Those standards require us to look down at specific federal grant programs and test for compliance with those regulations and laws over that specific grant. And you'll see how these 4 sets of standards are manifested in our reports in the document in front of you. So if you were to look at the document, it's basically made up of 6 sections. The first is our independent auditor's report. That independent auditor's report this year states that in our opinion, the financial statements contained herein do present fairly in all material respects the financial position and results of operations of the city for the year ended June 30, 2010. When you look at those financial statements, those are actually broken up into kind of some subcomponents. The first thing we talk about are the governmental activities and business type activities. Those are found on pages 1 and 2 of the financial statements. Those are kind of some high-level financial statements. They're supposed to be somewhat comparable to a business set of financial statements. They're on the full accrual basis. They're gathering together all the assets and liabilities, including long-term assets and liabilities of the city, and presenting those in terms of, did the city overall improve in its financial health? Then the next subcomponent is we look at individual funds. There are certain funds that are more important to the city just because of the size and the nature of operations. Those are called major funds. So we talk about those. And then everything else kind of gets collapsed down into a combined column. So if you were to look at how the city did this last year, the city ended the year at June 30, 2010. Total assets of the city of $58 million. Total liabilities are just under $18 million. So that means your total net assets of the city are $40 million. That's on a full accrual basis. And that's actually an improvement over last year. Your net assets went up about $3 million. So that's an indication of kind of some improving financial health. Basically, you're being careful in how you expend money. You're trying to conserve your assets as much as possible. And that results in an improvement in those total net assets. In looking at the funds, of course, we have two sets of funds. We have governmental funds and we have enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are basically your water and sewer systems. Governmental funds encompass everything else. In looking at your governmental funds, they also improved over this last year. The fund balance of your governmental funds increased about $600,000. Once again, a good indicator of prudent practices, not expending more than you bring in. So those are good indicators. The enterprise funds had a slight decrease in their net assets of about $630,000. Of course, part of that is related to depreciation expense. Proprietary funds, enterprise funds, use a full accrual basis of accounting, so depreciation is included in that. So if you look at it on a cash basis, actually your net assets of proprietary funds actually would have increased $100,000, except we had this non-cash item for depreciation of $770,000. So overall, I mean, there are some good positive indicators here in the set of financial statements. Does anybody have any specific questions on the financial statements themselves? Because there's lots of detail in those, and we could spend all night and bore everybody to death with those.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, we could spend all night on it. No, we're not going to.
Okay, good. So then, if you were to turn in your document all the way to page 89, 89 is where we have a report based upon those standards relating to Oregon municipal corporations. We talk about compliance with specific laws and regulations here. We cover laws regarding the deposit of public funds in financial institutions, indebtedness limitations and restrictions, the budgetary process, insurance fidelity bonding, programs funded by outside sources, state gas tax resources and the restrictions on those, investments and public contracting and purchasing. In looking at those areas, we didn't find any items of noncompliance, with one exception, that was that there was one budgetary line item that was overexpended. And that was in the sewer fund and materials and services, as overexpended by $24,000. The other thing that we talk about in that report is internal controls. And as part of every audit, we consider the internal controls of the organization. And we do that for two purposes. First, it allows us to plan the audit. You can't really audit an organization unless you understand how transactions flow through it, where resources are coming in at, the process for expenditures to be made. So we gain an understanding of those for that purpose. The second purpose is to identify any weaknesses. Now, we go through the audit. We find little things we'll discuss with city management on. If we find something that's significant, we'd be bringing that to you in the form of a separate letter. And I would like to note that we don't have that separate letter this year, so we feel pretty good about the internal controls of the city. So as I said, that's applying that second set of audit standards. if you turn to page 91, we look at this report relating to that third set of standards, those government auditing standards. And here we talk about two items. One, we talk once again about internal controls. Once again, we are saying we aren't finding anything that we consider to be a material weakness in internal controls. We also look at compliance with laws and regulations, that if you did not comply with them, you could have a direct and material effect on the financial statements. Our tests of your various compliance requirements did not indicate any instances of non-compliance that we would be reporting there either. And then the fourth set of standards are those, as I said, relating to specific federal grant programs. Of course, this last year, you had the Community Development Block Grant, under, in which you expended almost $900,000 of federal funds. So that was the program we tested. We looked at the compliance requirements for that specific grant, what the money was to be used for. We looked at where the costs allowable under federal programs, guidances, and that sort of thing. And we did not find any instances of non-compliance there either. So unless you have any questions specific about any specific numbers in here. Yes.
Questions. Is the auditor available for questions later?
Absolutely.
Go through the material?
Absolutely. Anytime you want to give us a call, we are available to answer any questions at any time.
Okay. And the second question is the scope of auditing that you perform.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you for instance, if money was transferred from the water fund to do some other unrelated task to meet that funding requirement, is that an audit exception, or do you get into the appropriateness of that kind of thing? Assuming they followed every rules are followed in terms of making the transfer.
Right. If all the legal requirements are met to make that transfer, then that complies with Oregon law, and there would not be an audit exception for that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't go into. It's a financial audit, not a performance audit.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Parham, now, I believe both Carlisle and Smith have been performing these for about 7 years now. Is that accurate? Because I recall that your audits are much improved to what we formerly had, not to make statements against the previous audits. And over that time, if I'm following correctly, it seems like our internal controls have also improved. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah,
Okay.
you have a good city staff, and they're dedicated to improving things and doing things right. And we found when we come here to do the audit, everybody's very helpful. They give us the information we need. We aren't finding any problems in how they're doing things. So yeah, I would commend your city staff in the job that they are doing and assisting us in performing the audit.
Thank you, because it seems it's much easier to go through the audit since we've had it, and it sounds like as the controls have improved and stuff. So I appreciate that. I did note that your associates noted that the Oregon Garden Resort is now one of the top 10 taxpayers for 2009. It's bringing some of the revenue in on the budgetary comments that were made. So I just bring that to light to our public that's here.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of them is mostly philosophical. What you just described was that the city, it sounded like, had a surplus of revenue for this last year. Is that correct?
Revenues exceeded expenditures, but not by a lot.
That was the $600,000 figure?
In the governmental funds,
Okay.
yes.
So I guess I have a philosophical problem with that, just that the community and the country is suffering and we seem to be making a profit. So that's not something that's audit, it's just strikes me as odd.
Well, when you look at your process, of course, going through the budgetary process. And for instance, if you look on page 6 of this document, you'll see the comparison in the general fund. In the general fund, you've done a good job of controlling expenditures. Expenditures were $3.7 million. You had budgeted $5 million of expenditures in the general fund. So in this, current economic environment, when you are, keeping within that budget by a good margin, I can't, as an auditor, I can't say that's a bad thing. Of course, we're real conservative, and we think, it's important to conserve these resources for future years. So you might, you view it as kind of, maybe the city should be expending more of it, but that can have a detriment in future years to the city too.
Or collecting less of it.
Or collecting less revenues. Mm-hmm. Well, when you look at your revenue side, if you were looking, except for some intergovernmental grants that you received just about the same amount as you budgeted.
Okay, so the difference is the CDBG grant, approximately $900,000 that went into the
Well,
senior
that's in a
center.
different fund. That was in the general fund. There were some other grants that the general fund received.
Okay. And in reading your letters, it sounds like you give us the world and then take it back. You say, let me read one for an example.
Okay.
The purpose of that report is to describe the scope of our testing of internal control over financial reporting and compliance, and the results of that testing, and not to provide an opinion on internal control over financial reporting or compliance. So it sounds like we're going to audit you for internal controls and compliance, but we're not going to test you for that.
Let's see. Let me get to where that.
I think I'm in your auditor's report. And there are similar wordings throughout the opinion letters.
Right. What is, as talked about internal controls in our audit, we obtain and understand the internal controls. We look at them, so we can plan the audit. We don't do sufficient work that we could actually give a positive opinion on the internal controls. There's separate professional standards required to be followed to do an audit of internal controls, sufficient that you can give an opinion on the internal controls. That's beyond the scope of a financial statement audit.
Okay, so the financial statement audit is taking the numbers that we produce and saying, okay.
Well, we're testing those numbers in great detail. But yes, I would point out, yes, the financial statements are the responsibility of city management. Our opinion is to give an opinion upon those financial statements.
Okay, I'm not sure that I'm with you, but I can probably catch
Well,
up.
essentially, okay, the financial statements are based upon the accounting data that's produced by city management, by the finance department.
Okay, so if there are problems in there, you will validate the problems as being part of the financial statements.
Well, if there are misstatements, we will be proposing corrections for those items.
But how will you find them if you are only working from the provided financial statements?
Well, we're looking at other information, and we look at a variety of information to make a determination as to whether or not those are fairly stated or not. That's kind of the beginning point of it, is the information the city gives us. From there, we apply various tests, including getting outside confirmation. For instance, we obtain lots of information from outside sources on the revenues that were provided to the city. We're also doing various tests on the expenditures, including going out and verifying that certain expenditures did in fact occur. So we're doing lots of tests on the underlying accounting information in order to give an opinion.
Okay, but this is a sampling process. It's not 100%.
That is correct.
Okay. And one other question, that this audit, we have two audit documents, one for the Urban Renewal Agency and one for the city.
Yes.
The Urban Renewal Agency is considered part of the city as far as your audit is concerned.
As far as the audit of the city, yes, it is, and we also issue a separate report on it, and I do have a copy of that here if you want to talk about it.
Oh, I have it too. You provided it to us, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah, and, you know, looking at just the Urban Renewal Agency, the Urban Renewal Agency is kind of it's one of those things. As a standalone entity, it doesn't look like it's in very good financial position because it doesn't have much in the way of assets and has quite a bit of debt. But the reason for that is, you know, it acquires assets with the money that it receives, and those assets end up getting transferred to the city. They aren't held by the Urban Renewal Agency. So the Urban Renewal Agency, other than essentially cash and receivables, doesn't have any other assets. However, it does issue long-term debt in its own name, and therefore those liabilities have to be presented. So it's like in the Urban Renewal Agency, you give away all the good stuff to the city, and you have to keep all the liabilities. So that's why that one doesn't look quite as good on a financial position as a standalone entity. That's why it's noted in our report that it is a component unit of the city.
But it is also a young organization that its property taxable valuation is increasing each year, so that's not that significant.
Well, yes, but most urban renewal agencies, when you look at them, are in a similar position.
Okay.
Where, you know, as they acquire infrastructure assets or other capital assets, those end up being transferred over to the city. It doesn't hold it in its own entity.
Okay. And I guess one final question about the city versus the Urban Renewal Agency. Both Bill and I are signers on the City of Silverton checking account, so that, you know, as payables come in, one or the other of us has to co-sign with a staff member. And I have noticed that the Urban Renewal Agency has provided grant funding and loan payments, and yet, have you signed a check for Urban Renewal?
I believe, no.
Okay. And I don't recall doing that either. So how are funds dispersed from the Urban Renewal Agency, if not under at least one elected official signature?
Well, it's because the Urban Renewal Agency does not have its own separate bank account. It's part of the city. It's essentially treated as a fund of the city. So when you sign a check from the city, it may very well be for urban renewal.
Is that true? Does the Urban Renewal Agency, do all of its checks come through the city's normal account?
Kathleen here?
Yeah.
Come on up, Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen Sarchos of the Finance Director. The Urban Renewal actually does have two accounts. It has a local government investment pool, which the incremental tax dollars from Marion County are directly deposited into, and it has a checking account that money, when it's paid out to the grants, is then transferred into that account for those grant payments to go out.
But that's just for grant payments.
Correct.
Okay. So who are currently the signers on that account?
I believe right now the active ones are Brian and I, and that's about it for right now. And there is a resolution that's coming before the board to correct the situation, to actually update it. It was my oversight, it has not been updated.
So the fact that we changed mayors 2 years ago and we still have the ex-mayor on that checking account is
Correct.
not significant?
That's my oversight. That is my oversight.
Okay. Very interesting. All right.
Well, keep in mind that there's very little activity in terms of check writing that goes to urban renewal, and anything that is authorized, you have to authorize as an agency. So we're not writing checks in a vacuum. I mean, it's basically for debt service payments, which you've already authorized through an agreement with the school district for the property on Westfield, and then grants that you approve as an agency.
Well, all I'm saying is that I see a difference between when I sign a check on the city account for similar stuff, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to the creditors that we have for various debts, and I don't see it for the Urban Renewal Agency, or at least I haven't in the last 2 years. So that's the purpose of this question, to find out how deep the audit went into that.
It's a valid question. I just wanted to make it clear that no payments to anyone can be authorized without the agency making, or call it, having a question and voting on in terms of the disbursement of those proceeds. We couldn't do it as a staff. You have to authorize that money.
Mr. Mayor, and to her credit, she's admitted it was an oversight. So.
Just an oversight on my part.
Okay. Other questions? Motion to provisionally approve the audit, pending perhaps other questions that come up when our eyes stop glazing over.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Question?
Question been called for. Those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your patience. It is now time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items in the city that are not agenda items this evening.
I need a
Actually, Mr.
motion
Mayor,
on
I
the
will
minutes.
move to accept the minutes
Oh,
of the
oh,
January
oh.
3rd meeting as presented.
Our second group of minutes tonight, I'm sorry. Second to approve the minutes. Further discussion?
Question?
Question been called for. Those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. My apologies for jumping the gun. All right. The rules are fairly simple. Try to limit yourself to 3 minutes of comment. Please sign in so that we know who's speaking to us, and the floor is yours. Mr. Stadley,
Good
you
evening,
go first.
Mr. Mayor and all the council. I'm here with Vince Till for the Silver Murals, and we are coming to this meeting asking for money that we need for upkeep on the murals. And you all know how important those murals are here in town. We have an expenditure, the cost of keeping these murals up, the 4 freedoms, the freedom of worship is $3,500 estimate, freedom of want, $1,200, freedom of fear, $1,200, the oak tree, $2,100, 20th century, $400, Bobby, $400, baseball Red Sox, $600, the lumber mill on my building, $1,200. Then we have an expense cost for repair the planter wall at 4 Freedoms, $200. Flowers in that category is $500. We have a grand total of $11,300 that we're asking for. We need the $11,300, which is estimated. We'd like the city to budget at least $7,500 of that to cover the maintenance of the murals. We'd like to get $3,500 up front for maintenance by May the 1st. The balance of that $4,000 by July 1 in the new budget year. So that's kind of what we're here for, is money.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
And
Mr.
we'll
Stanley?
answer any questions that you might have on
He'll
it.
answer all the questions.
Mr. Stanley, what was the total amount? I didn't quite catch.
11,300.
Is what we've come up with. I might note on there that the cost of labor is between $20 and $40 an hour. Now, the reason you see the first one, the freedom of worship, that high is that David McDonald, the muralist, is going to be working on that. And this is all faces. And faces and detail are probably the hardest thing to do for a muralist on a wall. And that's why that is high. When you look at the freedom of want and the freedom of fear, you see a lower figure of $1,200 each. And that Tanya Smithberg will be working on, and while there is detail in the turkey and all the food and whatnot in the freedom of want and the freedom of fear, there is not that many faces in there. So the detail isn't quite as critical as it is in the others. Now the one, when you look at the oak tree, Lori Webb is going to do that. And we have to do a special situation there where the plastic that was put on the wall, that is the finish of it, is the same thing that was used on the library, that you had to take all of it off and put a new face on the front. Well, that was the forerunner of it on that bank. And when it takes and heats up, it starts to crinkle. And what I got to do is slice it with a sharp knife or razor type deal, open it up and put a little water in it, and then put Gorilla Glue in it, and then hold it in there with a small 2x4. We know this works. We've done it once already, but this is the process in order to keep that mural on the wall and look good and be intact. Now, some of these murals that we're talking about have been on 16 to 15 years. And the key to murals is, if you're not going to take care of them, don't put them on the wall, because you're throwing thousands of dollars away. It is estimated that you have over 300,000 conservatively on the walls right now of murals. So it's not a small situation here. But most cities, they put the murals up, but they have no maintenance on them. And they lose a lot of them, or they get so bad that you get the negative. They had good murals, but you got something that looked like something the cat drug in now. And you don't want that negative going out from the town. Now, from my point of view, the one thing you got in this town that most towns don't have are the murals and the history of Silverton. And it is a big, big selling point. We get letters from people all over the world about those 4 freedoms down there. They're the biggest 4 freedoms in the world. We've had letters from Africa, Europe, Japan, Southeast Asia, people that come in and just are so impressed with the work that was done on them. So you're on the map. We have groups of people coming in from Portland. In fact, about 4 years ago, I took a group of people that bring people in as guides from Portland, and you'll see buses in here from time to time, 60 people on them, looking at the murals and then shopping downtown. And we took about 60 of them that day around, and they had their notebooks out and were taking down this information to bring back to the people they were going to bring to town. So it is one of the points of coming downtown, and that's what the people that have businesses downtown need and rely on. Now, we aren't the whole show, but we do bring them in, and word of mouth is what gets the job done. We have more of that than we do in the advertising throughout the area. So I'll answer any questions you have. Now, I will say this: we need the money. I need your help, and I sure appreciate if you can dig in and give us what we need, and I'll do my best to get the other difference between 11,300 from the 75.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I guess a question I would have is, are there funds available from the mayor's proceeds, mayor's ball, that could
Nope.
fund this?
That's the easy answer. The mayor's ball didn't do well this year.
Okay.
Turnout was poor.
Okay. I was going to say, we do have a community service council line item discretion fund, and Mr. Till doesn't have to convince me, although he did quite a spiel with Otto. But I would recommend or move that we go ahead and take the requested amount from the discretionary fund to supplant the maintenance of the murals.
And that would be,
How much do
Counselor
we
Thomas,
have in
for
discretionary
the 2 different budget years?
Yeah, how do we,
Since I don't have access to our server, I can't
They
tell
went
you.
to budget
I
days.
think it would be,
July 1st.
I could confidently say that you could do 4,000 this fiscal year and 3,500 on July 1, if that was your desire.
Okay, so reverse.
I'm also wondering if, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. As a discussion item, is there any way that you could rationalize that the murals create overnight stays?
An overnight what?
Stays.
Oh,
Making people stay overnight, I think is what
Oh,
he's
make them stay overnight, I'm sorry. I
Can
don't
answer?
hear quite
I
that.
don't want to speak for Vince, but he did come to my office and I kind of gave him some information. And what I recommended he do was he come to the city for maintenance money because it's harder to justify TOT funds for murals that already exist than it would be to say add a new mural. And maybe going after TOT funds for adding a new mural would make more sense than just the maintenance side.
okay. And the other option is that, because we could consider that deteriorating murals would be a blight on the community and would be then eligible for funding through the Urban Renewal Agency.
There you go.
There are a number of potential sources to help you with this that would not necessarily be property tax dollars, but would be similar to it that could help. So we can put our thinking caps on and
You
figure out a
can.
way to make this work.
And I can remind you that since I've been here at least, Mr. Till has been in my office, I don't even want to exaggerate here, probably
Every other day.
100,000 times, but, and every time he's made a request, I've told him you need to come to council, and that money has always come from your community programs line item. And that
Okay.
has ranged over the years from $1,500 to $3,500 to $4,000 a year. So it's been a consistent kind of offering for new murals and maintenance support.
This has been going on at least for 4 years. That
I may have exaggerated.
Okay.
no, you're right, but previous to that, all of it, we scrounged and took care of the best we could.
I
But-
am, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I
Sherry,
was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, I would like to discuss this during our budget process, just to see if that's,
You certainly can.
you know, just
It's-
to make sure that we keep it out there and don't forget to just talk about it. Where,
That line item in your budget is for stuff like this.
right,
It's not dedicated to one specific. You've used it to fund the senior center operations in the past. You've used it for flower baskets. I mean, there's any number of requests that come before council throughout the course of the year.
Poetry festival.
We budget a dollar amount, not specific lists of things.
I would suggest, following up on that, because I was going to suggest what Sherry's was, I think, leading to is maybe we consider during the budget cycle adding some additional funds to that line item that
Yeah,
is discretionary for any community needs.
yeah,
Develop.
something kind of to the mayor's point of maybe making sure that we do have it, an amount
Mhm.
there that we're gonna use for this. But I don't know if that's,
That's an
Yeah.
option.
right, we'll just
You
have
can
to.
do that during the budget process, under the community line items. You can have in the narrative support of the following organizations without putting a dollar amount. I think you
Okay.
always want to leave yourself as much flexibility as possible, and the request can come in, and then you can make a determination on how much you want to give each individual group. That gives you a lot more flexibility than saying we're going to give 7,000, because I don't think Vince is saying that they're going to need 7,500 every year. I think what he's saying is there's an urgent need for maintenance right now, and they're asking of the 11,300 for the city to contribute 7,500 of that over 2 fiscal years. I think that's the request that I heard.
Okay, do we have a motion to that effect?
I have a quick question here. And that has to do with how long, you do a maintenance procedure on the 4 freedoms. How long does that maintenance last?
We will put a UV coating over them, and that will probably last at least 5 years.
Okay, so that's typical cycle, it's about every 5 years you're looking at a maintenance project?
No, if you hit these things early enough, you can prolong that period of time. Now, you have to keep in mind what we're talking about. These 4 freedoms were finished in 1994. The first one was complete in 1993. And so you've got about 16 years there that you've had those up. And we have UV'd them about every 2 to 3 years because they're on the weather side to keep the ultraviolet rays from getting through and dissipating the picture itself. Now, when you put this UV coating on, what it does, it mats it. And in matting it, it brings the colors back out. Now, the thing you're fighting the most is the weather, because 3/4 of our murals are on the weather side, just the way the buildings are. And if the ones that are on the north side, you do not have, you can go twice as long before you put a UV coating on them, because they're not being beat all the time by the wind and rain and so forth.
So just for conversation about, I'm sorry, my understanding about this, for the Four Freedoms, we went for a longer period of time, and that's why more restoration is required?
Those Four Freedoms were the first murals that were done in town.
Okay.
The second one was the Homer Davenport, and the third one was the oak tree. And this is in a time frame of between, when the Four Freedoms were finished, 94, 95, Homer Davenport was complete, and then at that time, during 95, the oak tree was being worked on. Okay. And
what I'm trying to get to, Vince, is what is the normal upkeep cycle? Is it 3 years, basically? 2 years for the weather side and 5 years for the non-weather sides?
You could say that would be reasonable.
Okay, that's what I was trying to...
Yeah, that would be reasonable.
See, we had a motion and a second.
Yeah, further discussion. I just wanted to chime in and remind our group that we did look at this program as a tourism promotion grant and specifically asked them if they came back again to have it be for a new mural as opposed to me. Right.
Okay. Somebody refresh my memory what the motion was. 4,000 now, 3,500 in the next fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. Having restated the motion.
Question.
Question been called for. Those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Otto. Those opposed?
Yeah.
Motion carried.
You don't get to vote on it.
Your 3 minutes is up and you have a conflict of interest. You can't vote.
Well, just kind of force a habit. I used to be on the city council, for 6 years.
We remember.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
gone with me.
Yep. Been there, done
Well, I
that.
want to thank you all. I appreciate it, and the Mural Society does, and it's great to have your support.
We all thank you very much.
Thank you. Next in public comment, and please do not use the last 3-minute interval as a timing reference for the...
Yes, right.
Mine will be really quick.
Okay. Mr. Squires, please identify yourself and tell us what's on your mind.
I'm Jim Squires, and
It's working.
We got you.
I live at 1209 Mill Street here in Silverton. I have some papers, documents I'd like to enter into the record for the council and the city staff.
We can hand them out for you.
Yeah, I have some for city staff. I hope that everybody has one. First of all, I'd like to say how much I respect and how important the Renewal, Silverton Urban Renewal Agency is to the community. And I believe it has a lot of great assets for the community. And I think one of the things that needs to change is I came earlier today from that time period of 6 to 6:30 to be a part of that hearing process. And it wasn't until today that I understood that that's kind of a closed situation for the public. And I know that it's the council's goal and the city staff's goal that we have citizen involvement and citizen participation in that process. And I know that to be true. But today I learned that that isn't true. And so what I would like to ask you today is it possible to consider making that a process that the citizens can be involved in? Now, I came today hoping to share a concern with you over an action that was taken today concerning grant incentive money. And I'm not for or against the Urban Renewal Agency offering incentive grants, because that's one of the major things that's going to help our downtown core area get to where we want it to be and where our master plan says we need to be. But my concern today was, and with the document that I just handed you, was that the city would enter into an agreement with a company that as of today isn't licensed to do business in the state. And if you'll notice on here, this is the time when I actually talked with them. And also you'll notice in the areas that are highlighted, it shows that their license elapsed December 30th. So I guess what happened today is you entered into an agreement to give a non-registered business some money. And I believe that if I had had the opportunity to share during that public testimony, that might not have happened. And so again, I think here's a case where I think it's important that everybody be involved, you know, not just the council or the city staff, but city citizens as well. And so I would only ask that you take a look at the documents that I brought you and do what you need to do to correct whatever the problem might be. So, and I did verify with the Secretary of State's office today, and this is actual and official.
Okay.
So,
thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think what we will have to do then, considering this, is predicate any grant funding on a renewal of the business license, the assumed business name for the state of Oregon.
and that's all that I was going to ask today, is because I believe it's a good project. I believe it's a project that the community needs. And, you know, on the other hand, I had the opportunity to review the city staff's recommendation, and in there it talked about how some of our present office space or landowners or commercial building owners are way out of sight as far as the rent. It really saddens my heart to walk through town today and see all the for rent signs all over town for commercial space. And I'm not talking just retail space in the lower sections of these commercial buildings, but as you walk the downtown core area, you see all these buildings on the second floor that have for rent signs on them, and I just don't understand what it is that those landowners or those property owners are doing to make it look like such a blight for our community. Mm-hmm. And then I see that, and it saddens my heart, and then at this next moment I see where somebody's investing in a building, bless their heart, you know, and all of a sudden you're getting all kinds of activity in their building. Is there such a difference between the two? And if so, maybe we need to get to the point to where we have conversation with these landholders or these building property owners and find out what we need to do to correct that problem. I mean, doesn't it seem a little odd that you got all this space sitting empty, and now all of a sudden you got a building that's going to have, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 tenants in it before they even finish the project?
Well, I think what they've done is they have found the market price that people are willing to pay for that space, and that may have a moderating influence on other property owners in the downtown.
And I understand that, and I hope that they see what is going on, and maybe it's a wake-up call for them. I don't know. Maybe if the city has conversation with them, then there might be something that the city can do with them to help them, maybe some way during the, you know, the downturn of the economy right now, because I believe they need help too, and I don't know if it's because they're overpriced and priced out of the market. I don't know. All I know is that we got to do something. And if you have any questions, I'd like to hear them. If not, I thank you for your time and your consideration on allowing the public and the citizens to be involved in the Urban Renewal Agency and how they decide on, not necessarily how they decide, but to have a voice in where that money goes, because
to make the process more open. I apologize for that.
Yeah, absolutely, because I believe that that's the goal of our city. That's what's going to put the unity back into the community, instead of, you know, people sometimes feeling like, you know, that's a done deal, you know, and that's this kind of activity is what happens, and it surprised me that it took place the way that it did. And I know it was no fault of the council or the city staff, but I'm only asking you now to put it on the plate and consider it so that we can do what we all want to do and make it a community involvement situation, like we have in so many other things.
Council, any questions for Mr. Squires?
Well, I point out that is a separate agency. And there's a
I
public-
understand
there's
that.
a public comment
I
period, so
understand
think
that.
The agency, we as a council cannot take action, but I think your comments are well received.
Right. Well,
And I think it would be up to the chairman to ensure that
Absolutely.
comments are, if anybody present wants to solicit comments, they're limited to 3 minutes, but comments.
Right,
can be
absolutely.
solicited for, against, or impartial.
Right.
I think that's,
Right.
I agree with you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in our community here now, of all departments, all commissions, all budget committees, or whatever agency that it is throughout our city, this is the only one that doesn't allow public input.
Well, actually,
Well, our budget committee maybe, or,
oh, no, the budget's
Yeah.
open. I think we started that meeting about 5 after 6 and had the public comment period then, and I think you came in after that, didn't you?
no, I was here before.
So,
And I couldn't hear you, so I asked Steve Kay if you had
Did, Mr.
acknowledged
Mayor,
it, and he
it's-
told me
it's
no.
The second thing on the agenda, and you did ask for public comment.
right, but that was the PA system may not have been working at the time.
That's
and-
possible.
Okay. We will work harder at
But
that.
either way, I'd just like to know that it's in there, and I think, Mayor, you told me that was something that was normally not a public comment situation.
Oh, no,
Okay.
that's part of the agenda.
Okay, perfect. That's all I asked. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in public comment? Going once? Oh, all right. Please sign in if you haven't already. Tell us who you are and what's on your mind, please.
My name's Nancy Johnston, and I live at 1509 Lakeview Drive in Silverton, here in town. And I'm here today to talk with you about the decisions that you made down around Grant and North Water Street. So I thank you for your time, for listening to me. I've read back through the minutes that had happened the last few months over your discussions around that area. And my daughter received a citation, and the citation was for crossing the yellow line. And it falls under 811.038, which is failure to stay in your own line. And I had a conversation with the police officer the next day after the citation. He said he had issued 4 citations that day to students. And I would like for you to re-look at what you have done down there, because there are not any no parking signs up. So therefore, if there's vehicles parked on the roads, you have to cross the yellow line to get around that corner. So that's really not fair. I don't think that's fair to cite somebody for that, much less I would, the Chief of Police, Mr. Lewis, I would challenge you to look at when those citations were issued. I bet that most of the citations that are being issued in that area are from 3 to 4 o'clock, which I totally understand that. You're trying to slow down the high school students. But I think that you need to look at this more fairly, in that if you put a yellow line down the center of a corner like that, you need to do it to all the other streets in town that are that small, and you need to patrol them just as equally. You could take the same argument down on Ike Mooney, where there is a double line around that corner. That corner, people cut all the time, and you could cite them under the 811.038. So I think the main thing that I'd like to just convey to you is that you relook at this decision. I realize that it's a bad corner. I grew up down there. I lived down that neighborhood. I know that if I didn't want my parents to see me drive by, I'd take that corner, you know? And I lived down there a few years ago before. And the citations, those citations, there wasn't even warnings. This happened in the first week after the street. There wasn't even warnings to help educate our students. And part of this is aimed at the police department, that we do need to educate our students about driving. But on the same hand, parents like me getting I'm going to have to pay the $287 citation. And that's not, that's the way it is.
Just a quick question. Is the traffic lane too narrow?
It's too narrow.
So you can't
if you
get a
have a
vehicle
bigger
down it?
vehicle. If you're driving a bigger vehicle and if there's cars parked on the street, it's too narrow to stay in your own lane.
Okay. let
And
me-
the officer was citing people for crossing the yellow line.
Let me just, Andy, how wide, do you know how wide the traffic lane is there with, if cars are parked on both sides?
The street's 30 feet wide. I measured it.
Yeah, I can confirm with John, deferring to him, obviously as the engineer, when there are cars parked on either side of that street, yeah, it's not enough room for those two lanes, there's no doubt.
Oh,
It's on Grant Street where the problem is, rather than water, right?
It's both. The yellow line goes corner, all the way around the
corner
corner.
of Grant at Water.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's a narrower street, it's Grant.
Yeah.
Grant is narrower than Water,
So what
or at
we were-
least it appears that way.
It seems like what we were trying to do down there was avoid putting in no parking signs also.
I have an update on this.
Okay. We'll
It's not
take it.
gonna help.
Oh,
It's not
never
going to
mind.
help the $287
Well,
citation.
there are remedies for that. And I'd be happy, if you want to stop by my office or call me tomorrow, I'd be happy to talk to you.
Okay.
But they're not their municipal court judge, so there's really not
I
much
know.
they can do for your daughter. I went down and on three different occasions and filmed, and the great majority of the problems are the turning movement from Grant onto Water. Coming from Water onto Grant, people stay within the lane. And some of the problems that I noticed specifically down there are during the 3 to 4 hour seems to be the worst time. At noon, it doesn't seem to be an issue. I did notice that a great majority of the cars made a concerted effort to try and stay within the lane. However, there's always that small segment of the population that just does what it wants to do. And they were cutting completely into the other lane of traffic. And even without a yellow line there, that would be a violation of law, regardless. So some of the interim things that we're going to look at doing, I think they've already been ordered, is we're going to grind down the solid yellow line from a specific point on Grant and a specific point on Water and leave the traffic delineators in there. And we're also going to have to put in some no parking. We've talked to all the neighbors, and there's just one that we may have an issue with in terms of removing.
I just would express caution that we could end up with a special interest. We've already heard one gentleman in public comment want the dam removed. We could end up with 4 or 5 people. Next thing you know, we are driving down a goal path that is unintended. So
I'm going to recommend some dates in April.
Okay, but
just based on what I
These are council goals that we are adopting as a council. But before we do that, we need to hear from the community. And if we hear from people that they want to do X, Y, and Z, but our experience says that neither X nor Y nor Z is actually a wise choice, that's our prerogative. But we need to be open to that, because someone may come in with something that we hadn't thought of. And we say, yes, we need to do that as a group.
I get the gist of what you want to do. So can we agree that April would be a good month?
After the 15th.
After tax day? Okay. All right. I'm going to be no more brief than anybody was during public comment, apparently. I wanted to bring up to date that we do have a request for proposals on the street for city attorney services, and that's kind of a twofold thing. One is general counsel, and the other is for prosecution services. We may end up with 1 or 2 different folks doing those 2 different functions, depends on the type of responses we receive. I emailed you, I didn't get any responses in terms of what you would like your role to be. I think I recommended 2 or 3 different ways you could look at it. I could bring a final recommendation to you. I really view the city attorney as working for the city council, more so than the city manager. I think it's a position that by charter is generally, if it doesn't speak to it, is generally appointed by council. So I think you need to have a very direct role in that process. Our charter is kind of silent on the issue.
I will volunteer to be part of the selection process.
And I would recommend 2 others that may be willing to also sit on that.
We'll take Bill and...
Anybody else?
Okay.
Okay, good.
We'll lay
There
it
you
off
go.
on the new boy.
So,
I don't have a job.
just, you told me I was your job. I have not, and I never will.
No,
So-
he's your hobby.
He's my hobby, okay. You will get copies of the responses to the RFPs and a copy of the RFP that went out, and then we will get together probably in this room and we'll go through them, and you'll have a grading and criteria sheet that we'll send to you as well.
Okay.
Okay, moving right along. Goal setting is done. City attorney, I wanted to recognize Councilor Hayful. She received an award as the outgoing president for Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments.
COG.
Yeah,
COG.
COG's easier.
And quite a full room up the Oregon Garden. It was good to see that many people come to that facility. And Sherry did get some special recognition, so I wanted to acknowledge that publicly.
Thank you so much for your service.
It was just really well attended, and
Yes.
people were very impressed with the garden. The people I talked to were very impressed, so.
And
And a lot of them love Silverton. In fact, a couple of people said, yeah, we come here, we always make it a point to come to Silverton at least, 2 or 3 times a year. So it was really nice to hear those comments.
And the last issue is that typically we do my evaluation in March. We're going to have a full agenda in March. So a couple options are we can do it in April or we can do it after the regular scheduled meeting because I believe we have exit interviews.
We have a tourism promotion committee meeting prior to that.
So doing it prior to is not an option. So it's either after the meeting or we can do it in April before. It's your call completely.
April's good for me.
Which also gives you more time to procrastinate on filling out the evaluation. So you can take that February date and move it to March, whatever that corresponding date is, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Anything else? Good. We'll start with Councilor Schmidt.
She's going to be quick.
Yes, thank you.
First one to
Well under the 3 minutes. Councilor
Yeah.
Palmer.
Just one thing only, I want to pick up our conversation about the dog park and see if the body would agree with me that it's time to move forward on locating a site and ask the staff to bring back our options for how we can move forward starting yesterday.
Okay. It should be easy up at the senior center site. I mean, the dog park can be moved if it's a better site
I
somewhere.
think we have a couple of options, but I think there's also some, there'd be a little bit of discussion about how to get the park in place beyond just having a site.
Sorry.
It was me, I'm just trying to hear.
I'm hearing from the staff member that will be responsible for the alternatives analysis for the different sites that May would probably be the earliest we could bring that back.
Bringing it back in May is fine, I just want to get the ball rolling.
Right, so if you
yeah.
can get consensus, that I just wanted to let you know that May would be the
I'm
earliest.
asking for a consensus.
I agree. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, that's it.
Sherry.
No, I was just going to mention the event up at the garden for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, which is a mouthful. But yeah, that's it, I think.
William.
I haven't heard too much council communication the last couple months during these winter months about potholes. I think that city staff and I hope Marion County and ODOT have been proactive because I've noticed, except for the one that always gets bigger and then you fill it and it gets bigger again, the staff's been staying on top of it. Very much appreciated. Garden functions. First Citizens Banquet on the 19th, which is Saturday. It's a sponsored event by the Silverton Chamber of Commerce. Always festive environment. During that First Citizens Banquet this year, there will be a fundraising attempt going on for the Ford Family Foundation Leadership Council community project, and the community project right now is a kiosk, informational and directional kiosk. The tentative location is at Town Square Park, and during the First Citizens Banquet there will be a 50-50, meaning that for a X dollar purchase ticket, half will go towards the kiosk. The other half will go towards the drawing at the end of the evening, that person will receive that amount of money. The Ford Family Foundation does contribute up to $5,000, maybe $6,000 for the project. And first pass at the kiosk, and we're in the process of reducing the scope, primarily how nice it is about $24,000. So we're reining in the costs, but we still want to make it fit the historic standards and be a focal point in the community. So anyway, thank you.
And just to mention, Councilor Cummins is the recipient of the Distinguished Service Award this year from the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, that's kind of why I ducked down. I didn't want to bring that part up. I wanted to talk about the kiosk. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, actually, I have a laundry list tonight with my blue stickers and my handouts, but I'm going to do something that I don't think I've ever done since I've sat at this diocese, and I'm going to just take a bye and say thank you to all those that applied for Planning Commission and ask that we send them a letter, keep them on file, and ship a little note to City Manager.
Love Randall.
I'll take a little Randall's time. I have left with the city manager and with the council members here a section of the Parks Master Plan relative to Pettit property, and attached to the back of that is the bequest that Salem Audubon Society received and the conditions of that bequest. If you will look at this material, you'll find that there is a very symbiotic relationship between what this money was received by the Audubon Society and what our plans are for that Pettit property. Now, I happen to know that the former mayor of a large city in the area has been campaigning hard against Audubon Society to get it in a large city in the area. I think that this bequest sets aside over $600,000 for initial development. It's all laid out in the sheet there. And I really think that we should try to warm up the idea and take advantage of what the good fate has wandered our way. This next month, there'll be several meetings in which the Audubon Society will be coming to closure on a number of issues, which will lead directly to decisions about what they want to do with their nature center and how well it fits together. I just think that it's important in the process that will occur that we extend a welcome to them to without agreeing to anything particular. The next item here in that packet is the story I heard on the radio and I gave the chief relative to a relatively inexpensive, and I just let him respond to it.
Yes. Scott gave me some information on some kits that are, they've actually been used in Iraq. Some of this equipment was there, or material was there when I was there. But it is a trauma kit, basically.
Yes.
For gunshot wounds.
Yeah.
Has pretty much everything that you would need. And it kind of follows the Tucson incident. So I appreciate you giving me that information. The kits aren't very expensive, but I'm going to take a look at maybe some grant funding for that too. It would augment our current first aid kits in the car.
It's like $99 a kit.
Yeah,
You need
yeah,
one for
very
each car.
reasonable.
Yeah, 2-hour training. And then I also have one other thing I want to alert people to is that Oregon, and a lot of people are already aware of this, Oregon has an interesting program for seniors of limited income in terms of deferral of their property taxes. And also for disabled veterans and widows surviving spouses. I photocopied a number of explanations of this, and I hope that, I'll give it to Brian, hope that this might be available in the finance office. Basically, it means that you don't have to be taxed out of your home. What happens, this program is that a lien is put on your property at 6% simple interest, and they pick up the property tax. And so when you sell the house, or some other event occurs, then the state gets refunded the money that was forwarded to you. And then there is a fund that goes from the state to the local municipalities to cover the unpaid property taxes. So the key thing is that the sign-up time for this is January 1st. One is April 1st, the other is April 15th. And so if you know folks that are really having trouble paying their property taxes, I would recommend them to get the material down to the finance office, if that's okay with Brian.
Well, I'm sure there's some links we could put on the website for this too.
Perhaps. There's a little card in the corner, that's the expert in the county for each program. And you know, those of us are fortunate to have incomes, good incomes. We can't forget those who are not so well off. End of statement.
Thank you, sir. I actually have nothing, but since Scott brought it up, perhaps the council would like to appoint him the official liaison between the City of Silverton and the Audubon Society, giving him no authority whatsoever to negotiate for us, but just the title of liaison.
Actually, I feel comfortable being a citizen in that regard.
Very well.
And that way, whatever I say, it's just some crazy citizen.
Anything else to come before this august group? All right, we are, a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Yes. Aye. We're adjourned, thank you.
Because if we didn't come up with the answer.